Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to day three of PHARMASTEER 2026. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And I feel extremely proud to say that this pioneer virtual orientation program, which is organized by AstraZeneca in collaboration with Department of Pharmacology and Therapeutics, HGS Medical College and KEM Hospital, Mumbai, is receiving great appreciation this year as well. With that, I, Ashish Kumar Dubey, Manager Medical Excellence from AstraZeneca, would like to welcome you all to day three of PharmaSteer 2026. I hope you all had a great time last 2 Saturdays with topics related to medical affairs role in the industry. And without any further ado, let us jump directly onto the first topic of the day, which is cross-functional ways of working. And for that, we have with us Dr. Gagandeep Momi, Therapy Area Lead, Biopharmaceutical Medical, AstraZeneca India. Dr. Gagandeep, a senior medical affairs leader known for shaping brand strategy and lifecycle management, driving aligned medical plans, and fostering high impact scientific engagements. She led cross functional teams, mentors MSLs, ensure compliant medical governance, and partners across ecosystem to accelerate market access and patient impact. She is a trusted voice with opinion leaders, guiding strategic dialogue and collaboration. She brings a forward looking perspective to innovation and evidence generation that advances care. With that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Gagan onto the stage. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Ashish, for the kind invitation as well as the amazing introduction. Thank you for that. Great. So a very good afternoon, everyone. We can go to the next slide, Nirav. I would like to start, by asking you all a question. How many of you believe that if a drug has excellent science, it will automatically succeed? Maybe a text in the chat or a show of hands can help here. So be honest, we all are doctors and pharmacologists, and we trust science, and I do trust science. And when I joined Pharma, I believed exactly the same thing. But then I learned something very, very surprising. Next click, Nirav. Science opens the door, but it is the collaboration that decides whether patients ever receive that science or that molecule. So today I'm here to show you something that medical textbooks don't teach. Next slide. How great science becomes real patient impact through cross-functional collaboration or cross-functional ways of working. So hi everyone, I'm Dr. Gagan. I work as a medical lead, and today I will share with you all what really goes behind the scenes in the pharma. Next slide, Nirav. Before let's understand, why collaboration matters. Let me tell you a small story. Imagine a brilliant scientist who discovered a molecule. This molecule has incredible pharmacology, brilliant mechanism of action, beautiful clinical trial data. Now imagine that this incredible molecule is sitting in the lab forever. The obvious question that strikes me and will strike you all as well, why? Why is it sitting just in the lab? Right? It's in the lab because nobody worked on getting it approved. Nobody worked on its pricing strategy. Nobody worked in talking the science of this molecule to the doctors. Nobody manufactured it. Nobody worked on its supply and availability at different pharmacies. So this molecule, which is scientifically incredible, but is clinically useless now, right? So in the pharma industry, we learn a powerful truth. The truth is that no function alone can change the patient outcomes. Success happens when multiple experts, multiple functions come together and work towards one goal. And for the pharma industry, that goal is the patient outcome. A great molecule alone cannot change patient outcomes. Instead, we need good science. We need a regulatory team that will get that molecule approved. We need a good market access team that will help with pricing and reimbursement of that molecule. We need medical, we need sales to talk about this molecule to the doctors. We need a safety team who will monitor the side effects of that doctor, right? We need a team that will ensure supply and availability of that molecule. So when all these pieces align together, patients finally receive that incredible innovation or that incredible molecule. So I want you all to think of pharma like an orchestra, right? A violin is playing beautifully, but if the drums are missing, it's not music, right? So pharma works in a similar fashion. One team cannot work alone. Let's go to the next slide. Thanks. So, what is cross functional and why it really matters? Cross functional collaboration, as I said, simply means that experts from different domains they come together, work together towards a simple single goal, and for the industry the goal is the patient outcomes. Okay, you can also draw the analogy here, as I mentioned in the bottom, with a sport, and for India cricket is the best example, right? A batsman cannot win a match alone. It also involves other players, right? You need a captain, you need fielders, you need bowlers, you need coach, and many more. And all these, when they work together as a team, they can win the match, right? And winning for them is the scorecard, the team which scores more wins. Similarly, the scorecard for the farmer is the patient outcome. So when all these teams work together and they make a difference to the patient's life, that is when they win. If any one function fails, the entire team loses. Next slide. Now that we talked about, what is cross-functional collaboration, why it matters, now let's understand what are the key functions in pharma. So when I joined industry, like say 10, 11 years back, I had this perception that, pharma consists of a lot of sales people and some medical people, some doctors. Okay. So, but actually pharma is much more. It's a mini ecosystem of many experts. We have medical affairs, which is, you can say, ensures the scientific integrity of whatever we discuss. Then we have clinical development team that helps in generating the evidence. We have regulatory team who navigate the rule book, who helps with approvals and other things. We have market access, who ensures that medicine is affordable and also works on reimbursement pieces. We have commercial team who talks about the science of that drug to the doctors. We have pharmacovigilance who ensure that the safety of the molecule is monitored in a periodic fashion. We have supply chain who will ensure that the drug is available at all the pharmacies where it is actually required. Now imagine, as we were discussing, if a drug is wonderful, but it cannot treat the patients because it is just stuck in the warehouse, it doesn't make sense, right? So you need this whole ecosystem operating optimally. Next slide. Another quick question I want you all to think and ponder on. Which function do you think has the biggest impact on the patient outcomes? Now, you have seen in the previous slide all the different functions that work together to improve the patient outcomes. What you actually think now, which of these functions is most important? I used to earlier think the one that is generating data, the one that is talking about the science. But the answer here is all of these functions. So if one function fails, patient is going to lose. Okay, so all of these are very important, and that is why it's very important to work hand in hand. Next slide. So biggest example to talk about cross-functional collaboration is the drug cycle itself. We all have studied it in our pharmacology syllabus. A medicine's journey is very, very long, right? There is initially discovery, then clinical trials, then approvals, launch, and then real world usage. So at every stage, it's a different team that leads the work, right? It is a scientist who will discover a molecule. Then it is clinicians who are going to do the clinical trials. Then comes the role of regulatory team who will help with approvals. Then the commercial medical team who will work on the launch, talk about the science of the molecule to the doctors. Then there is safety team who will ensure the safety of that molecule, right? So think of it like a relay race, like the baton here is science, and every team must run their lab, and that too perfectly. Okay, next slide. A little about, where medical affairs really becomes special. So medical affairs actually a scientific bridge within the pharma industry. It bridges between the science and the strategy. It bridges between the doctors and the industry, and also between the evidence and patient outcomes. So our job as in medical affairs is not promotional. Our job is scientific leadership. It's our job to ensure that every decision we make as an organization is grounded in the evidence. Okay. Next slide. So this is one example I just brought together, internal example of internal collaboration. So when they're about to launch a molecule, a new molecule, science has just come up. So we are working on the brand strategy, how this molecule should be discussed so that it really improves the patient outcomes. So to build the brand strategy, you see here, it is not just one function that is building the brand strategy. All the teams have to come together. Medical will talk about the science, the clinical data, what is the differentiation of this particular brand. Then there is marketing team who will make, it simple and draw a communication narrative out of it. Then there are, patient advocacy groups, which talks about that disease area, create awareness amongst the patients. Then there is role of government and, policy team who will work in updating the guidelines. So they will work with the policymakers, the government to ensure there is updation of the guidelines with the newer emerging evidences. And there is role of the commercial excellence, ensuring we are reaching the right stakeholders, discussing the science in the right way, so that it reaches the right patients and improve their outcomes in the right way it is meant to be. So this is an example of internal collaboration within the pharma industry. So the next slide talks about, Nirav, can we go to the next slide? So it's another example where, we also not just collaborate internally, but also externally. Without just getting into the details of the slide, just hear me. So we had this new molecule in the space of hyperkalemia. We were trying to understand the market. So we realized that hyperkalemia is managed largely by, say, cardiologists and nephrologists, but their treatment approach is different. So we felt that there is need to have aligned consensus so that there is uniform approach, guideline based, when it comes to managing hyperkalemia patients in India. So we thought of building that consensus. So here, the medical affairs is the initiator, but we cannot do it alone. We have to partner it. We have to collaborate with different functions. So the first we collaborated, Nirav, you can keep on clicking next. So the first we collaborated, Nirav, you can click one time. So we collaborated with the medical societies, both cardiology and nephrology societies, to have their accreditation, their backing when we build this consensus. And then we cannot build this consensus on our own. We need experts. We need cardiologists and nephrologists who worked as a steering committee. They did a series of, talks and discussions, and then they built this consensus. Now the consensus draft is there. We have to work with the publications team to publish it, right? If the publication is there, we cannot leave it there itself, right? we have this publication. Now we have to ensure that it reaches the right stakeholders. So we worked on the dissemination. For dissemination, again, we have to partner internally with our teams, medical teams. Externally, we have to partner with the societies to help us disseminate the same. So this is another example where you collaborate not just with the internal stakeholders, you also collaborate with outside stakeholders who can really help, create something new and which is required and will help shape the practice. Next slide. Now, little about the skills. We are moving towards the end of my presentation, but I also want to talk about the skills that are required in the doctors like us whenever we get into the industry. So most of us, including me, when I was about to join industry, I felt that the most important skill or strength is my science, right? So yes, science will help me get entry into the industry, but success will require a lot more. Apart from the scientific credibility, we all need to wear a strategic hat. We need to know how this science will make a difference to the patients. Okay, so that strategic hat needs to be worn and it can be learned, right? Apart from that, we all need to communicate very, very effectively. We need to influence without authority. We need to learn how to, move the people around us, get the tasks done. And for whatever we are doing here in this ecosystem, we have to keep the patient in the center. The ultimate gainer or the benefit person is the patient here. And another interesting fact here is in pharma industry, you rarely command people, right? I'm just using some examples. Like in my personal life, I can command my children, oh, switch off the TV, right? Do your homework. I can command them and they will do it. But in the pharma, I cannot do that with my team or with the doctors, right? I cannot go to a external healthcare professional and say that my molecule is the best, it has the best of the results, so write it. No. All I can do is I have to influence that expert, right? I can influence him and I have to influence him to bring that change, right? So influencing experts is a very, very important skill. It's an art, and that is very much required in this industry. Next slide. Another thing which I really want to warn you all about the mistakes we make when we enter the industry. Being doctors, strong in science, we stay in scientific silos. We say it's that, I only talk science. But in the industry, in the pharma, science must translate into actions. So you have to also talk how this science is going to make a difference, right? So we have to break this barrier. Another common pitfall is that we ignore commercial realities. So as I said earlier, if there is a brilliant molecule, but a patient cannot afford it, right? It is not going to improve patient outcomes. So you have to take perspectives of other functions as well. We want whatever you develop reaches the patients and improve their outcomes. So we have to consider the perspectives of the functions and people around us while making decisions. We also underestimate here about the regulatory complexity that is involved in the pharma industry. So in the pharma world, every word we say is regulated. Like in clinical practice, we write prescriptions. In pharma, we write documents. And these documents are, very well regulated. If we are very casual in preparing a document, it could be a great risk for your organization. So whatever we do has to be very much evidence-backed. So my next slide. So reflection question for all of us. So we have heard of a lot of skills that are required. Now, what skill you determine or what is that skill that will determine your long-term success in the industry. And I'm sure you must have understood by now, it's not just the science, not just the knowledge, it is the collaboration. So the future of the medicine belongs to doctors and people who really work across functions, across disciplines. Next slide. So the scientific knowledge do help doctors into pharma, but the long-term success will come from the ability to align the teams, bridge the science and strategy, translate evidence into patient benefits, because ultimately science will discover the medicines, but collaborative efforts will ensure they are delivered to the patients. So my closing line for you all, the next slide. So I really want to close with this line that great pharmacologists, they discover the molecules. Great pharma leaders ensure those molecules reach millions of people. And that journey is powered by cross-functional collaboration. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Gagan, first of all, for joining us today and for a great presentation and a great talk, reiterating the importance of utilizing the collective expertise if we want to drive clinical application of science. Thanks a lot for that. We do have received some questions from the students where I would seek your inputs. And my first question to you, Dr. Gagan, would be this is something which is evolving around non-promotional nature of medical affairs as a function. So, keeping that in perspective, how do you create a shared mission and measurable outcomes across diverse teams? So this is something which is talking about overall goals which exist, being in medical
Yes.
affairs, how we ensure that.
So see, overall goal for any, if I take the example of launching a molecule, right? So the medical will always talk about the unmet needs in the disease area, right? We'll talk about what is the current management, what are the current gaps in the management, and then we bridge or position our molecule, in a way that it improves the patient outcomes. So it is all talking about the disease area and how the positioning of your molecule is addressing that unmet need. Nowhere in our communications we have a very peer-to-peer conversation with the doctors. It's only on evidence-based, be it around the disease area or the science of our molecule, the trial results. It is never ever, we never cross that boundary of saying you this is amazing science, so you write it to the patients, right? And we never get into that sales zone. So it is definitely shaping their practice. Intent is definitely shaping their practice by giving them the right evidence. So if they feel, and it is then left to the doctor that if they feel there is a need, there is a better solution, they can bring it to their practice. But the discussions are purely non-promotional here. So this is, then the promotional part comes through our commercial team. They have a different role. They clearly talk the advantages of the molecule over the others, right? And then they also get into the prescription discussions. So they have a different role. So we help in that mindset shift, or you can say giving the right evidence to the doctors, and they do their sort of advocacy. And ultimately, the objective here is that the right patient should get the benefit of the right treatment available at that point in time.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gagan. My next question to you would be, and this is something which is revolving around disagreements which happen in day-to-day activities which we do. So here's the question for you: how do you handle disagreements on strategy or evidence and move forward quickly, considering the goal in mind?
No, I think this is a very good question. If somebody has asked, I think that person is already very well prepared to come into the industry. So we all need to know that, conflict is an integral part of any industry, right? So it is going to happen. We'll have our perspective. The other functions will have their different perspective. So the whole idea is, when there are conflicts, ultimately we have to give the right evidences, your point of view, which is not emotional or out of empathy or emotional. It has to have the backing of evidence, right? why you're saying your point of view, and ultimately how your point of view is going to help achieve the goal, right? And same is for them. They also have to give some sort of the right justification that is helping to reach the goal. So it has to be not emotional conflict or personal conflict. So you sit together, discuss together. It is largely the communication that will help you resolve a conflict. Both the parties have to come together. Being a leader, I see conflicts happening between my MSLs and sales colleagues. So it's important to understand both side of stories, right? You cannot make a decision by hearing just my teammate, oh, this has happened to you, so I support that. No, you have to hear both side of stories, and then find where is the gap and try to address that by bringing both of them together, right? And then aligning that, see, this is our goal and this is how you should work there. So I think communication that is backed by the evidence, Ashish, can help resolve conflicts, and conflicts are going to happen, and I think it's a healthy environment. We should encourage conflicts, right? One way is when there are conflicts, it means we are encouraging creativity amongst patients, if it's amongst our teams. Otherwise it's like we have said something and they're just executing that. So conflicts actually enhances creativity in people. So it's a healthy environment. Conflicts should be there, but a leader should learn how to address that.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Gagan. My next question, which came across, is something which I feel is revolving around stakeholder mapping, and some, line is there with respect to the project management as well. So the question is, how do you identify and engage right internal and external stakeholders early? So it's more of identifying right people, both internally and externally, to drive the projects forward. So maybe Dr. Gagan, if you could throw some
Yes.
lights onto that.
So obviously here we always have to be very, very practical while identifying internal stakeholders. Again, it's like we all, if I take example of myself as a manager, if there is a project, I will pick those people who are suitable for that project. We look into the strengths of my team and assign them the tasks or projects which will help them, based on their expertise, who is really good in getting that work done. I'll pick that person, right? It's a strength based. And external stakeholders obviously depends, like if I'm working, for example, I'll give an example. If I was working in hyperkalemia disease area, so I have to see, I cannot go everywhere. You have to see, your uh, the reality, like what is your circle of operation. So if it is hyperkalemia, then I have to find out who are the stakeholders who manage such patients, right? Then you identify those. So if it is, for example, nephrologist and cardiologist, there are others as well, right? But I cannot go everywhere, so I have to take a call. So I'll pick. So that's how you prioritize, depending upon your circle of operation, how much you want to expand. So it's like basis the strength you assign internal projects, I would say, and even externally depends what is your circle of operation, and then you prioritize. Like, these are my most important stakeholders. I will be able to make biggest impact here if I work. We cannot go everywhere. That's uh,
All right.
are my views, Ashish.
Yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, Dr. Gagan. And that brings me to my last question to you, Dr. Gagan, and that is something which is really good coming from the students out there. And the question is, which cross-functional skills should MD students cultivate now, which would help them be industry ready down the line?
So I've already, I think, shared some of the skills in my presentation as well. Being doctors and pharmacologists, we anyways need to be excelling in the science. That's the number one non-negotiable skill. Apart from that, I think it is the very right time to also, think from a strategic perspective how that science uh, can make a strategic difference, right? Wearing that strategic hat and making decisions, like how to apply that science, how it can make a difference to the lives of the patients. That is very, very important. Communication, yes, you have to communicate uh, across functions. So as I was saying, don't work in silos. So you have to learn the art of connecting with your cross-functional teams. So that is very, very important. Influencing without authority, as I said. You cannot command anyone here. You have to make a difference, you have to influence different stakeholders. So learning the art of influencing, these are some of the very soft skills which you need to learn. And if you start today, it will really help you excel here. And definitely teamwork, collaboration, what the whole topic was about, that for sure.
All right, perfect. With that, I'd like to thank students for the amazing questions and to Dr. Gagan for equally amazing answers. Thank you so much, Dr. Gagan, for joining us today and for responding all the questions which came across. Thanks a lot
Thank
for
you,
that.
Ashish, for having me here. Thank you, everyone.
All right. With that, let us steer ourselves to the next session, which is medical affairs in product life cycle management. And for that, we have with us none other than Dr. Shashank Srinivasan, Medical Director, Oncology Business Unit, AstraZeneca. Dr. Shashank, a leader who needs no introduction. However, for those who are new, he's an oncologist and healthcare leader trained at Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. At TMH, he was consultant in GI cancers, disease management, group radiation oncology, working at the interface of multidisciplinary care and translational practice. He now serves as medical director oncology for AstraZeneca India, where he leads the medical and diagnostics agenda end to end, shaping strategy, directing evidence generation, and building partnerships to advance precision oncology and deliver significant patient impact. With that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shashank onto stage. Sir, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Good afternoon to everyone. Another beautiful Saturday afternoon, and we are back with an academic feast for PharmaSteer. I'm extremely thankful to everyone who's tuned in today. Maybe I'll take just a minute to share my screen to bring up the slides. Ashish, you can let me know if my slides are visible.
Yeah, it's visible now.
I'll go to slide share. All right, perfect. Okay. Um, so, when I was given this topic, the immediate thought that came to my mind is I have a very different lens. I'm a clinician by heart, practiced for a very long time. So patient care is still at the core of what I think and how I think. The aim for the next 15, 20 minutes for me would essentially be to try and walk you through what are the possible avenues that you have, across the whole medical affairs spectrum, within various stages of the product life cycle, and also what are your roles and some of the core competencies that you would need to essentially have, to manage things effectively across the spectrum. So let's dive into it. What is essentially pharmaceutical medicine? Now, again, I am not a trained pharmaceutical physician, to be very honest. Like Ashish mentioned, I'm a clinician, I'm an oncologist. But this is fascinating, right? A pharmaceutical physician is at the intersection of so many different possible roles, right? Like I said, the possible avenues range right from being a medical affairs physician to being in clinical research. Academia, of course, is at the heart of what you're trained for, but also in terms of drug safety and a lot of preclinical work. And this is all at the cutting edge of innovation, to be very honest. You're also there's a huge avenue in terms of being the gatekeepers. Uh, a lot of our regulators come from pharma academia, and there's also a very integral part of large pharma groups now, which is related to patient access. Right. And this entails, of course, core medical affairs, a lot of public health, policy shaping, and the end goal is, about equitable care, bringing innovative medicines to as many patients as possible and as fast as possible. So, a majority of sectors within medicine are dependent on pharmaceutical medicine, diagnostics, devices, and then a huge thrust, in today's day and age is about prevention and treatment, right? Of course, um, uh, and like I said, I have an oncology lens predominantly. So catching cancers early, preventing cancers is the only way to go when we talk about going ahead. What are some of the perspectives on medical affairs that I can share with you? And I've tried to break this down into three groups essentially. What are the bare basics? things that you will have to do on a day-to-day basis, some of the building blocks which will accelerate, give you an edge over the rest of the people around you. And this is what modern medical affairs is about, doing the next step. And then, of course, it all boils down to actual impact, which is down to translating science into actual practice. Right. So basics would be, and I'm sure Gagan before me covered a lot of this, and in earlier talks as well, you would have heard about it. Medical affairs is essentially the moral compass of any organization. So the bare basic expectation from all medical affairs professionals is to be extremely high on ethics. Make sure that you are sort of responsible for driving compliance within the organization, within the practice of the organization. So that is something which is your core DNA, so to say. You're all supposed to be extremely well versed with clinical data and any product data. What are the benefits, risks, a lot of regulatory background that you need to be aware of. Of course, cost effectiveness, like I said, in this era of market access, access to patients becoming very important. You need to be extremely also well versed with a little bit of health economics, and I'll come to this in my later slides. Gagan, of course, would have spoken about teamwork, working together, collaborating, and also leadership, right? And an extremely important facet of being in medical affairs today is to have an acute commercial acumen for you to understand how everything eventually impacts, of course, patients and then eventually business. So that is absolute basic for all of you today. Um, Now, the next step, the building block, so to say, is to really sort of bring the cutting edge that medical affairs can to business, right? And this is where we start talking about engaging clinicians, right? Where you really start partnering with them to try and curate the best possible for your patients. A huge part of medical affairs and what medical affairs does today is evidence generation. Of course, there are a lot of regulatory mandated post-marketing studies which will entail your phase fours, PMS, things like those. You also work with your investigators to look at investigator-initiated studies, bring those ideas to life, and real-world evidence generation is sort of an inseparable part of what we do today as part of evidence generation. And also, increasingly, a lot of the innovative molecules today depend on precision diagnostics. Um, Treatment, high-end treatment has become extremely personalized. One size does not fit all. So you're really looking at identifying the right patients for the right therapies. Hence, knowledge of cutting-edge diagnostics is extremely important. For instance, in oncology, you have something called next-generation sequencing. Of course, a lot of you would have read the building blocks of this in terms of PCR, Sanger sequencing, IHC, things like those. You need to be extremely well versed with this and take those solutions to your clinician so that you're able to match the right patient to the right therapies. um, a lot of work going ahead with patients, not directly but indirectly, trying to get their voice to the fore, working with a lot of patient support groups, patient advocacy groups, trying to empower them, making sure that their voice is heard. And that becomes an important part of what we do. And of course, leveraging technology. We're in the age of AI everywhere around. That is what we hear about, but it's also about responsible use of artificial intelligence and other such technology that is available to us, be it early detection, screening, picking up patterns, picking up delays, things like those. That is where the real next step in terms of advancement for us lies. And what does all of this lead to? And that is the intangible, that is the most important part of being in medical affairs. That is why we are here, to make sure that at the end of the day, every patient benefits. We help in improving patient outcomes. And that is where you need to look beyond product, right? You need to look beyond just working with clinicians. We need to try and figure out ways to work with the entire health system ecosystem, essentially. So as industry, where we come in is to try and really play a role in terms of ecosystem shaping, um, and also look at the fact that we are able to bring all of those innovative medicines to the right patients. Great science is of absolutely no use if it is not benefiting the patient at the end of the day. Um, and the last point, some of you may find a little curious, is environmental sustainability. At AstraZeneca, we take sustainability extremely seriously, and it is not just our responsibility, but I feel everyone's responsibility to make sure that we're working towards this, and are extremely cognizant of the fact in terms of what we are leaving behind for the next generation. All right. Now, like I said, where do we fit into all of this, and what are some of the core competencies or the skill sets that you'll require when you're stepping into this role, when you're stepping into medical affairs? Like I said, the end goal, and that is the biggest part of the Venn diagram that you see right in the middle, is for us to ensure that all of this innovation that happens at the back end, that the R&D teams work on, is going to benefit the patients at the end of the day. You have to find a way to get impact, to the bedside. So where do you figure in all of this, right? Number one, non-negotiable is technical competency. You have to be the best at what you do. Gone are the days where medical was a support function within large organizations, where organizations were commercially driven with such cutting edge science that we have today. It is medical which shapes strategy, and you need to be the best at what you do, like I said. And if you are to partner with clinicians effectively, you need to talk their language. That means if I am to talk to an oncologist, if you're in oncology medical affairs, for instance, you know that you're going to be talking to a super specialist, right? A DM medical oncology, or an MCH in surgical oncology, and so on and so forth. If you are not talking the same language, then nobody is going to entertain you. These are busy people, so we need to be on top of our game. That is the first non-negotiable. Second one, like I said, breadth of perspective will really help you to have a very clear commercial acumen, to understand what the regulatory teams do, to understand what your cross-functional partners across market access, trials, publications, all of these do, for you to really be able to clue in strategy, and work with them closely. That breadth of perspective has to be there. And medical leadership, of course. Like I said, no longer a support function. You have to lead from the front. So we're not just here to say disseminate science within organizations in terms of strategy shaping, in terms of what is your best patient fit, where do you position your molecules. And I heard Gagan talking a little about that. All of this should come from the medical affairs team now. So that is where that sense of being a leader within the group becomes extremely important. And moral compass, as I said earlier, ethics, they come before anything else. At AstraZeneca, we live our values of doing the right thing. So you have to make sure that ethics and applying all principles, having that lens for every decision that we make, is extremely important. Ashish, while I'm talking, please keep me on time in case I'm getting a little behind schedule. Please do let me know.
Absolutely, sure, sure.
All right. Now look at where do you fit into all of this, and what all do you need when a lot of you are budding, or I'm presuming you are MD pharmacology residents who are looking to make your way into the industry in the next couple of years or going ahead. What is it that you need for any of these functions? What are the skill sets? What are some of the competencies that are required? I'm giving you a very high level overview on this slide, and I'll then dive into the product life cycle, and where do we fit into the product life cycle in terms of what we do. So of course, like I said, um, a lot of you are MD pharmacology residents. We'll go clockwise from the left, and I'll sort of walk you through some of the core competencies that are required. um, MD pharmacology is great. You have a beautiful overview through your curriculum, 3-year training in terms of what is required, preparing you, rules, regulations, regulatory background, etc., research, all of that. But as long as you are a doctor with some background in any clinical branch as well, I myself being an example, feel free to look at this as a very, very viable option for you, right? It's different. There's a steep learning curve, but it is gratifying at the end of the day in terms of the scale at which you're able to bring impact to patients. Um, One very important thing that I would say, and I would allude to this a little further, on day one when we inaugurated and kicked off PharmaSteer, I think one of the KEM faculty made a very beautiful point in terms of being very well integrated with clinical medicine. I think that is extremely important in today's day and age for you to be in medical affairs. Your lens should very clearly be from an external standpoint. All your thinking should be based on what is it that the patient goes through, what is it that the doctor thinks about when he's prescribing a certain molecule to the patient or treating a certain disease. As long as your thought process is from an outside in perspective, I think you will be good, and you're going to be set for success. Um, your north star always has to be patients, and that is a non-negotiable. Always have to think about patients first. Immerse yourself in patient journeys. Spend as much time bedside, in clinics, wherever possible. Try and understand what a patient goes through, from symptoms to diagnosis to treatment to follow up, and be very, very, very thoughtful in terms of trying to understand what are the factors, what are those data points from any science that you have that clinicians look at when they are treating a certain patient. That becomes extremely important. And of course, it's good to have some experience with policy. So try and pick people's brains, try and look at other functions and see what they're doing. And tech, of course, is not going away, right? Certain individual attributes then that come into picture, of course, leadership, being well spoken, having executive presence, and you'll hear a lot of this. Some of this you may feel at this stage in your career, you may feel is jargon, right? You may hear stuff like executive presence and influencing without authority, but all of this matters. But these are skills you, if you don't have some of these skills today, do not worry. These are skills which are very easily cultivable, right? You just have to be persistent, be at it. Um, and as you rise up the ladder, it is always preferred for senior leadership to have experiences across the spectrum. Look at different geographies, the experience of having worked in different cultures, how do other markets operate, how do other people work. That equips with you, that equips you with the soft skills that you need. Other than the actual core competency, it also gives you the soft skills that you need, which are important in handling multifarious situations. And of course, when you uh, become anybody, even when I was a senior resident, I remember it is a teaching position for anybody who's in academia. All senior residents are supposed to be, teaching positions. So paying it forward is very important, regardless of where you are in your career, right? It is very important to mentor younger people, to train, coach, and set on the path the next generation for success. I feel that is extremely important that we play a part as far as that is concerned. Okay, now coming to the very core of what I was asked to speak about today. Um, a lot of the slides that come up may seem very busy. I don't want you to pay a lot of attention to the slide per se. I would be extremely happy for you to be posting your questions in chat and we can take them towards the end. Essentially, what I've done here on this slide is broken down the product life cycle into multiple phases. And this is essentially what happens before any product comes to life, comes to the market. Okay. So we'll move from left to right and you'll understand how a product moves through the life cycle. So any molecule, let's call this molecule X in, let us say, lung cancer, for instance. Now, when you are trying to figure out an unmet need or you are looking at what competencies an organization has, the first part is drug discovery, right? So there is this whole preclinical phase where you're trying to see what you have on your hand. So essentially, across the life cycle, I've also tried to break down what is it that is required from you in terms of scientific input, and you could be positioned either through across the life cycle or in certain places depending on the roles you wish to take up going ahead in the industry, right? So somebody who's usually involved at preclinical stages may not be involved in some of the other part of the product life cycle, right? So it's essentially down to what you choose to do. And then on your left, top to bottom, you will see what is required from you in terms of scientific input, which are the stakeholders that you would have to engage with and work with, and what sort of work you will need to do. and what is it that is required in terms of an evidence generation strategy, or what sort of publications you'll have to look at that point in time. This is a very high level overview again, like I said. Preclinically, essentially, what is it that you have to do? You have to try and validate mechanism of action, try and prepare dossiers in terms of how the drug works, figure out what sort of trial designs you are going to need. You may have to work with principal investigators who are into early phase trials, who are extremely good with translational research. Look at them and have some sort of preclinical publication strategy where you're just trying to publish in translational journals and look at the bare bones of how drugs work. Now, the phases of the life cycle that come after this, and probably we'll just quickly walk through because there's a brevity of time as well. Now is where the molecule, now let us say as an organization, I feel I have something tangible on hand, right? I feel this molecule in the preclinical phases, in maybe in vitro studies, has shown some promise, and I can probably bring this to first in human and beyond, right? So that is where your phase 1 to 3 clinical trials come in. Okay, that is a huge part of how drugs come to the market. Of course, most approvals happen on the basis of large phase 3 randomized clinical trials. Some drugs, if they are extremely promising and very complex designs now, right? 1A, 1B, cohort expansion, etc. Essentially, in the early phase trials, you're trying to figure out whether the drug is safe, what sort of safety profile the drug has, trying to establish baseline efficacy in a phase 2 single arm trial with objective response rates as the endpoints, and then really look at efficacy, safety outcomes for the phase 3 trials. Now, if you are involved at one of the phase 3 stages, you may be the person who's designing the trial, or you may be the person who's reviewing the protocol design, right? And your inputs will be extremely crucial in a phase like that. You may have to work with the data safety and monitoring teams and look at that, right? And then during those phases 1 to 3 of trials, let us say one of these trials is in India, correct? And at AstraZeneca, we have more than 50 trials in oncology in India right now. So one of these trials is in India. You're working with 10 PIs across 10 sites. You may have to bring them together. These are new molecules, different mechanisms of action. People are trying to get used to how these work. What is the tolerability profile? What are toxicity management guidelines? So you may have to bring them together for investigator meetings, work with sites to try and identify if there are issues with patient accrual, if there are any practical issues with the protocol. And a lot of times it happens that we amend protocols based on what the PIs tell us, because they may not be practical in the clinic, right? So you have to really work with those sort of stakeholders and then look at probably, some sort of an early phase publication for any of these trials. So that is your job at this stage. Now, next important phase of the product life cycle is actual registration. So a lot of these trials, the pivotal phase 3 trials on which based on which the products get approved, are known as registrational trials. Okay, because this is where, let us say, a trial was done predominantly in the US or first in the US, then the organization will submit to the US FDA saying we want the molecule to be registered based on the results of this trial, right? And the same we do in India based on either uh, a global clinical trial which has been done in India, or if not, there are other ways to look at that. So at that stage, what is the language that goes on the product label? What does the indication exactly say? What was your eligible population? What were the outcomes like? What does the product label read like? That becomes an extremely important part of what you do. Second is, and this is not as much for India, but for markets which are predominantly payer driven. When I say payer driven, basically the government pays for the drug or for the treatment. So you work with the HTAs, you work in terms of health technology assessment, or work with payers to try and identify what is the right set of patients, what is the benefit that your trial shows in terms of outcomes for these patients, and based on that, the government of the day then takes a call whether they are okay reimbursing a certain type of treatment or not. Of course, then working with external stakeholders in terms of physicians to try and see what sort of patient profiles would they prefer a certain molecule for instance, right? Again, and um, another important part of what you will actually publish is the dossier or the SMPC at this point in time, which is again the product label essentially, which has all the information, efficacy, safety, dosage, excipients, etc., and that comes in at this point in time. All of this sort of happens in the back room where a lot of the other teams within the organizations may not have visibility for a lot of this work, but this is the backbone of bringing something to life, bringing a product to market, right? And then come the phase of action. Okay, then launching the drug in India, and then the drug maturing over time. And LOE stands for loss of exclusivity, which essentially means that a patent for a particular drug may run out, and then a very different type of strategy is required. So, of course, launching any drug would entail a lot of work with your cross-functional teams, and this is where the commercial teams then become active. All the pre-launch work is essentially handled by the medical teams and some other functions like regulatory, supply, etc. Right? Once now the drug is available in market is when you really start working and collaborating with your commercial teams as well. It is very important for medical here at this point in time to figure out what is the messaging, how do you position the drug, what is the value proposition that you create, and at the same point in time also have a very clear analysis in what is the evidence gap. If let us say at a therapy area level, for what your drug is trying to address, there is no evidence for Indian patients, then you try and build that. Okay, practically, if I were to say this, let us say I have no, in lung cancer, I have an EGFR inhibitor for which the use of which, the experience of which there is no evidence in India. I will try and look at bridging this gap, right? And you try and work with investigators either through an IIS or through a non-interventional study and really look at bridging this gap. And that analysis has to happen at baseline. Um, then, of course, dissemination of the science. You really start working with external stakeholders, like I said earlier, clinicians, patient groups, large medical societies, and you try and forge tangible partnerships, which will ensure that the science for this therapy area for the product is disseminated as quickly as possible, and you're trying to reach as many people in as short a time as possible to ensure that at the end of the day majority of your patients are benefited from the science that you're bringing to market, right? And of course, look at what sort of publications you require and start planning for them. um, Real world evidence is something, like I said, you will really have to address here, but the other lens in India and markets abroad is for you to look at health economics, like we spoke about a little while earlier, and you really have to start planning for HEOR, etc. All right. Okay, in terms of growth and maturity, as the products get a little older in their life cycle and exclusivity starts coming to an end, you have to really look at how do you differentiate from the market. You start looking at new medical entities. NMEs are essentially new medical entities. How do you bring the next wave of innovation? How do you mitigate loss of patent? Once a patent goes, 10, 15, 20 generics may come. How do you sustain the value proposition of your molecule over anything else? Is there some biosimilar scientific competitiveness studies that you need to undertake? You will have to ensure that the medical teams are leading all of this. Okay, I think this should have given you a very fair overview of how you are placed. I still have a lot of slides, but I probably will not go through them in a lot of detail. Maybe the slides can be shared to some of you later. But I think essentially this should have covered the bulk of what we wanted to speak about. A lot of the rest of what I wanted to speak about is in terms of the core competencies that you will require. And probably just take a minute, Ashish, to go through some of the skill sets you should be building on right now to ensure that you are set for success when you come into the clinics. Like I said, for a lot of the preclinical phase, you need to be very well grounded in your basics and translational science. Be very clear in terms of target biology. If you're, if you're interested in oncology and want to come into oncology, tumor biology is king in oncology. You need to be very well versed with that. All your PKPD modeling, mechanisms of action, very, very well versed with all of that. Learn clinical trials very well. Protocol design is going to be an integral part of what you do. Be very clear with your ICH GCP. What are the ethical frameworks? How do institutional ethics committees work? How do you select endpoints? What is the right type of study? Even when you're doing RWEs, ambispective versus retrospective versus purely prospective, be very thorough with all of this. And eventually, once you start doing the core work, launch and beyond, stakeholder mapping, working with external stakeholders, but very importantly, working very well with internal stakeholders as well. Medical alone will not be able to achieve. You can lead, but you cannot conquer alone. Work very closely with your commercial teams and other stakeholders, and be very, very, very strategic in terms of how you, lead strategy, not just in R&D, but also in terms of commerce. That I think is very important. I think these were, I mean, we had a plethora of similar core competencies that were required. Um, Probably I'll just quickly end with something that always resonates with me. Um, and there's a very nice quote by Paul Meyer, and it essentially says, if you continue to think the way that you've always thought, you'll continue to get what you've always got. So the idea is to challenge ourselves, challenge existing thought process, challenge status quo, and try and push the boundaries of science. Make sure that you're leading the way in terms of how your position within the framework of stakeholders in the organization is. Maybe I'll finish with that. Thank you so much, Ashish, for the opportunity. Very happy to take questions now. I also see Harish is here, so I on a Saturday afternoon I should not be wasting time for anyone. So maybe we'll get cracking with questions, Ashish.
All right, then. Thanks a lot, Dr. Shashank, first of all, for joining us today and for taking this insightful as well as thought-provoking session for the benefit of the students who are viewing us live. I know we are running short of time, but I do have one question upon which I'll seek your view. And the question is something which is revolving around how strategies work. We know that global inform area level strategies, and that in turn inform marketing company strategies. So, question is something which is related to that. The question is, how do you adopt global strategies and evidence to India's clinical reality? So maybe would request a quick comment from you on that, sir.
Hey, it's a great question. Again, as Gagan was saying earlier, a lot of the questions already, I mean, it feels like people are ready for the industry and they know more than I did when I came in. Um, there are two facets to this, and there are two ways that I look at it. A lot of what large farmers try and do is to try and improve efficiencies. You have similar strategic frameworks that filter down, right? So that you don't have to do a lot of thinking. But I would, in fact, suggest you do a lot of thinking, right? We've very clearly demonstrated with multiple examples in our own organizations that we have been actually the first to initiate a strategic pivot in many directions, and that has sort of filtered up and gone to global. And that happens a lot of the times as well. So, the crux of saying this is that you know your doctors best, you know your clinical scenarios best. You have to really lean on that local knowledge for you to be able to drive what is right for you. So, while global strategic frameworks are guidances, right, that is a large guidance in terms of how global teams think the direction that we should be taking generally. But all markets are very different. A Korea or a Taiwan is very different from India. An out of pocket is very different from a payer driven market. So you have to try and do the best in terms of how you see your clinicians, your patients, and the problems that actually afflict them. Patient journeys are different. It is very important to be aware and be able to, refine strategic frameworks.
All right, thanks a lot. I do have, I'm flooded with questions, by the way, but due to paucity of time, I'll have to park those questions. Maybe Dr. Shashank, I'll reach out to you later, and we can respond students back after this particular session. Thank
Sure,
you so much,
sure.
Dr. Shashank, for being here with us today. And with that, Let me thanks to the audience who are viewing us live for all the questions which came across. I ensure that I'll come back to you with the appropriate responses soon after this. All right. With that, let us now move forward to our next talk, which is AI in and digital framework in pharma. And for that, we have with us Mr. Harish Das, Senior Director, Commercial IT and Digital AstraZeneca India. Mr. Harish, an accomplished industry leader with more than 24 years of experience building customer loved products and scaling businesses. He combines data driven thinking with practical execution, leading hands on and collaboratively across functions. His focus digital and AI led transformation, product and portfolio leadership, and sustainable results oriented growth. He brings a sharp problem solving mindset, turning complex challenges into clear, actionable solutions. He is known for aligning teams around impact, accelerating delivery, and strengthening customer trust. With that, please join me in welcoming Mr. Harish on stage. Sir, over to you. You're
Yeah,
on.
am I audible?
Yes, now you are.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. Really appreciate that you thought I could guide, already the stalwarts who are on the other side of the screen. Um, Humble to, share whatever I have learned so far. I've just made a small video. Just wanted to share, with all of you just to watch. This is like 5 to 6 minutes video, and then we'll open up for a question and answer. I have few slides, but I would rather keep it open for participants to kind of ask questions and then look at some learning hopefully. Just let me know if you can hear the audio. That's very important. Ashish, the audio is audible?
Uh, I could not hear it.
No, Harish, can't hear the audio.
Not audible. Just a second. Give me a second. Let me share again the whole thing. Share sound. Okay. Um,
It's actually becoming the
is it audible now?
foundational operating system for the entire life sciences industry. We're finally moving past all the hype
Yes.
and into an era where this is standard infrastructure. So, what does that actually look like on the ground? Let's dive in. You know, this quote from a recent Reuters event just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the core problem we're going to unpack. We have these incredible, revolutionary tools, things like AI patient matching, predictive analytics, you name it. But way too often, we're just plugging them into these outdated 30-year-old workflows. And that, well, that creates a huge gap between what's possible and what's actually happening. And believe me, that gap is massive. Some studies have shown that up to 95% of initial AI pilots in the corporate world failed to deliver any real business impact. And here's the kicker. It's usually not the AI's fault. It's a systems problem. It's a failure to integrate these tools into real workflows and build them on a solid data foundation. Okay, but here's the thing. That's exactly what's changing in 2026. This is the year the so-called pilot era of AI officially comes to an end. We're at a tipping point. AI is no longer a shiny object for some side experiment. It's becoming essential enterprise-wide infrastructure. And this represents a huge shift in how we think about this stuff. For years, healthcare was what one industry leader called the land of 1,000-point solutions, just a tangled mess of disconnected tools that didn't talk to each other. The companies that are winning in 2026 aren't just adopting AI. They're building these unified platforms where all the data and workflows are seamlessly connected. And look, this isn't some niche tech trend we're talking about. This whole transformation is being driven from the very top. A Deloitte survey found that over 3/4 of biopharma executives see these AI platforms as a major growth driver. And a poll of over 800 marketing chiefs, for 68% of them, AI is their single defining issue. The message is crystal clear. The C-suite is all in. All right, so let's see this in action. Where do we start? Right at the very beginning of the journey, drug discovery. How is this new AI operating system totally reinventing the lab? You know, the biggest lesson we've learned over the last few years, it's not about having more data. It's about having better data. Experts from Artigen point out that data maturity is really what matters. It's about having clean, well-governed, integrated data sets. Like one executive at Eli Lilly put it, the hardest part of bringing AI to bear isn't the algorithm, it's the data. And this is what you can do when you have that kind of mature data.
This concept of the digital cell is emerging, and it's a powerful one. Imagine this, an AI model that can pull in all sorts of data, genetic sequences, cell images, clinical notes, and use it to simulate how a cell behaves. So instead of relying only on physical experiments, scientists can test ideas and predict responses in a virtual world. This lines up perfectly with the FDA's big push to find alternatives to animal testing.
Okay, so from the lab, let's move on to the next big hurdle, the clinical trial. This is that evolutionary bottleneck we talked about right at the start. It's where the incredible promise of a new therapy so often just slams into a wall of logistical reality. So what's the real problem here? What's at the core of this bottleneck? For decades, we've said we're patient-centric, but let's be honest, our systems have been totally site-centric. We design trials around the hospital schedule, around the protocol's strict requirements, not around the patient's actual life. And that fundamental mismatch, that's why we keep struggling with the same old problems of recruitment and retention. But here's the good news. AI is finally giving us the tools to flip that model on its head. It can scan millions of health records to find the right patients in days, not months. Digital tools mean people can be monitored from their own homes, which cuts down on the burden of travel. For instance, instead of some poor soul manually digging through charts, an AI can sift through an entire hospital system's electronic records in a single afternoon to find eligible patients. These aren't just small tweaks. These are the game changers that can finally break that bottleneck. All right, so let's say a therapy gets approved. Awesome. But now the challenge totally shifts. How do you reach the patients and doctors who actually need it? And yeah, you guessed it. Just like in R&D, the old marketing playbook is getting completely torn up and rewritten by AI. I mean, just look at this. This shows a fundamental shift in how we all find information. We're moving away from traditional search engines and toward AI-powered answers. Patients, doctors, all of us. We're not just Googling it anymore, right? We're asking conversational AI for direct insights. This change in behavior is why some analysts are predicting a huge drop in traditional search volume. And for brands, that means you risk becoming totally invisible if you're not ready for this new reality. Which brings us to a brand new acronym you gotta know, AEO, or AI Engine Optimization. It's basically the new SEO. It's not about ranking on a search results page anymore. It's about structuring your content so that AI models like ChatGPT trust your information and use it to build their answers. In healthcare, where misinformation can have literally catastrophic consequences, becoming a trusted source for AI, well, it's not just a good idea, it's non-negotiable. So what does this new playbook actually look like? Well, it's basically 3 big moves. First, direct-to-consumer marketing has to evolve from just being TV ads to becoming personalized service platforms that actually help coordinate a patient's care. Second, with third-party cookies going away, building your own first-party data engine is really the only way forward. And third, it's all about orchestrating a seamless experience for everyone across every single touch point, from sales reps to websites to virtual assistants. Okay, let's get into our final section. Because with all this amazing technological power, right, it comes with a ton of responsibility. How do we govern these new systems and make sure they're used ethically, safely, and fairly? And let's be real, the challenges here are huge. Think about it. In a super regulated industry like healthcare, you can't just send sensitive patient data to a server anywhere in the world. Organizations have to have control over where their data is stored and where their models are trained to comply with strict privacy laws like GDPR or HIPAA. For life sciences, this isn't a nice to have, it's an absolute requirement. And that's where we'll end it. In 2026, the question isn't if AI is coming to healthcare anymore, it's how we're going to manage it. The technology is being woven into the very fabric of how we discover drugs, run trials, and care for patients. It's here. We can create a more precise, efficient, and personalized system of medicine than we've ever imagined. The only question left is the human one.
So that's the brief video. Ashish, I would love to take questions if there is any questions that we can answer.
All right, perfect. Thanks a lot for that, sir. Thank you so much. We do have some questions, and my first question is something which is revolving around regulations that are there in place, right? And the question is,
Yeah.
how do you navigate evolving AI regulations and ensure compliance, privacy, and ethical use without slowing innovation? So maybe you could
Yeah.
share your thoughts onto that.
No, that's a great question. So, it's not just for India, it's across the world, right? And every company which is building the foundation model, their focus is on how do we ensure that we use AI very responsibly, which means basically explainability, like how the AI model works and calculates and arrives at the solution. That step-by-step calculation has to be clearly visible, explainability. Second is data privacy, which is basically like if I'm uploading a, let's say, healthcare document into the chat GPT, is the chat GPT using that to train their models and keep my data? Then which law like GDPR or DPDP, which is currently launched in India, is it governing that, I can revoke my data? For example, DPDP, just like GDPR, right? You can request data to be deleted from a particular platform. And there are also platforms available which gives you complete access of where your data is stored across the internet. Now you can unsubscribe or you can delete and things like this. So with the evolving power of technology, the responsibility also is very, very critical. So the accountability and responsibility clearly is increasing. Because imagine, like, people are now talking about AI doctors. Now, I have seen examples of AI doctors, fantastic in terms of the kind of output it creates based on the conversation. But the idea is that who is accountable ultimately? If something happens, some adverse event happens, who is accountable? AI model cannot be held accountable, or the company which is building the AI cannot be accountable. Is the company who takes the model and trains it on the medical record, are they accountable? Or the patient who is consuming AI doctor as a service, is the patient accountable? So this is a topic which is not clear yet. I think this is a very interesting and hotly debated topic, but it's extremely important when it comes to human life and human health. There is no way that we can have human out of the loop. We have to have a human in the loop, and therefore, as we see how tech evolves, like we are now talking about artificial general intelligence or super intelligence. Super intelligence is all about like the intelligence of a super intelligence would be 100 or maybe 1,000 times greater than the collective intelligence of the human whole world population. So when we go there in 2028, it's far more important that how do we address these questions, right? The super intelligence may create a new language which humans may not be able to understand, right? In that case, then how do you even evaluate the risks and the accountability, that leads to adverse impact or whatever impact on the patient life? So, human in the loop is the way forward, and every output that is produced by AI's, services, whether it is a scan image or whether it is a AI model giving some recommendations, or whether it is document intelligence, which is basically sitting on the top of doctors' EMR and then analyzing and giving recommendations. So all of this has to be supervised with the humans. There's no way that we can now say that, hey, AI is safe or AI is absolutely great to kind of do autonomously without human in the loop. So this is an evolving topic, Ashish.
All right, thanks a lot for that, sir. And then the next question which came across is something which is more closer to pharmaceutical industry. The question, Harish, is what is end-to-end value story of AI in pharma? I mean, be it from discovery to the patient outcomes, and
Right.
if you could share where are the biggest near-term return on investments that are, in the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe we would invite your comments onto that.
Yeah, sure. So as you saw in the video, right, there are multiple steps or stages in which pharma companies are utilizing or leveraging the AI. First is drug discovery. So drug discovery is a process which is like extremely resource intensive, time consuming, and the success rates are extremely low, right? All this is because the data that goes into drug discovery are not small. These are massive amount of data all over the place. They are not connected. And there was no system earlier to analyze this data collectively and kind of understand the pattern, create new ideas, new synthesis. So all of this is now possible. So drug discovery is the first stage where the pharma companies are already leveraging. As you saw, right, and AstraZeneca recently announced that they have acquired a company called Modela, which is a drug discovery AI powered drug discovery capability. And we will see a lot more new drugs, new molecules, new materials coming in place in the next 5 years. than we have invented in the last 200 years, right? So clearly, there's an extremely high possibility that we'll see drugs that we have not even imagined in our lifetime, right? So those are possibility. That's the drug discovery part. The second is the trial, right? I mean, how do you even reduce any kind of living beings in the loop before you actually kind of confirm that this drug is actually operating the way it should be without impacting any living beings? So that is all about like creating digital twins. So digital twins is like replicating the entire cellular behavior at a mitochondria level, at a DNA level, to even macro level, which is like a total biology of a human being. So how do you replicate the whole behavior? Like physics is replicable. Today, you look at like any AI video, you can easily see that the entire physics has been replicated on the video, right? If you drop a ball, it falls down because of the gravity. Or you swing a ball upward, it also goes up, but also stops because of the gravity. So all of these, right, physical phenomena is also replicated. Even chemistry labs are now virtual. So AI chemistry labs. So if chemistry, you mix element one with element two and create certain temperature and pressure and moisture and the entire environment, it also produces certain reactions. All those reactions are now virtual. AI can create it now. You just type it like, I want to add magnesium with phosphorus and add hydrochloric acid and create a temperature of 36 degrees Celsius. What is the deal true? So it will give you those answers immediately, instantly, without even conducting the experiment. And those experiments are validated by scientists, and these are proven to be real. So when you replicate physics, chemistry, maths, biology on a digital environment, the idea is that your innovations are going to be much more faster, because then you add more computing power. It can actually analyze petabytes and large scale data within fraction of seconds and give you intelligence and ideas. Those ideas are something which is game changing. So instead of me doing an animal trial, I can actually do a testing on the digital twin environment and get a feedback before I actually do a trial on the humans or on the animals. And if those digital twin feedbacks are accurate, then I would say at some point in time you will see the trial phase also reduces to few days. So that is the second part. And the third is obviously, that marketing and creating awareness among populations and doctors. That's the phase which is already there right now. You saw the video was created by Notebook LM, which is an AI tool from Google. And it creates fantastic contents, whether it's audio, video, and multiple languages. For example, like today, the healthcare awareness in India is not that 100% positive. So using the AI power, just imagine like, you want to create a disease awareness in say Marathi language or in Telugu or Tamil, all of this that you can do. And the beauty is you can even participate as an external human being into that conversation of AI, where you can ask questions and the AI host actually can change their responses and answer you questions on real time, right? It's like imagine the AI host, they are actually talking about a concept. You are a human being entering into the conversation, asking a question, and they will actually answer your questions on real time. So what it means now that, there's something beautiful, right? The cost of intelligence has become zero, right? Now there is not a single person who is using GPT or any other AI tool can say I have more intelligence than the other. So the cost of intelligence has become zero. So essentially, everybody has the access to the same level of intelligence. Now, what do you do with this intelligence, right? It can produce multiple content, like multiple languages, interact with people in a very personalized way. How do you use that capability to create awareness, to kind of um, you know, do create access to the last patients who is sitting on the last remotest part of our country? How does it get access to the healthcare? So those are ideas. Actually, somebody who want to, play with these ideas can actually figure out a lot of opportunities there. So these are three, and the obviously logistics is already powered by AI. So how do you make sure the medicines reaches fastest way to the right patient at the right time? And so these are very important. And clinical setting, hospital setting, EMR, all this and the diagnostic devices. All of these are now slowly getting powered by AI.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. And the next question which came across is something which is revolving around diagnostics and
This impacts at a cellular level, right? So that means basically every cell, the way it perceives a medicine, um, this entire phenomena is nothing but information, right? So informations of cellular dynamics and your chemistry of medicines, how they interact with each other. So if you look at now, a lot of data currently, patient-specific data is like spread all over the world. So it's not in one place right now. But the first idea is to bring those data into one place, right? And integrate a lot of biomarkers. Like, for example, there's a Stanford study I was studying last week, basis on the sleep data, right? Sleep, how well you sleep, how much you sleep, when do you sleep, all this can be captured now with a smartwatch, right? And all of this data, they have used an algorithm to analyze, which can predict 200 different types of disease that you are likely to get in next 10 years, right? So all of this algorithm currently is being invented. So all thanks to AI, right? So all of this, you could see that going forward, you will see a lot of this data set as we aggregate, analyze using the power of AI, new molecules, new precision medicines and custom medicines. For example, like, Ashish has a problem and the medicine will be built for Ashish, not just for a regular medicine. So I would say those eras are coming very soon. Those eras we have seen partially to certain extent in Ayurvedic medicines, but those are coming definitely to allopathic and advanced treatments.
all
Yes,
right.
I could see Shashank as a
Yeah.
raised an
All right.
hand.
Yes, Dr. Shashank, please.
Harish, fascinating, first of all. Every time I hear you, I'm inspired. Just maybe if I could give my 2 cents and add on to
Sure.
what Harish was saying in terms of this. Uh, while so much of this is futuristic, but a lot of it is already here,
Yeah.
right? And we in the clinics, for instance, we were using radiomic data very, very frequently to prognosticate patients. So you're essentially looking at, for instance, and I'll take the example of a lung cancer patient. You're looking at baseline CT scans of the thorax to predict which of these patients are at a
Yeah.
higher risk of developing brain mets in the future. And then you can probably look at which generation of TKI should this patient get based on such features, right? A lot of
Right.
this, probably one of the impediments to this is a lot of this has to be individualized. So every institute will have to train a certain data set based on what
Yeah.
sort of scans are you doing, what scanners are you, but that baseline information has to be similar for that, training data set for them to have a validation data set, so on and so forth. But a lot of this is already being practiced.
Correct.
And of course, this has huge implications for screening, and we already do a lot of work around that. So, yeah, I mean, Harish is absolutely right, and the possibilities are immense and limitless. Just wanted to add that. Thanks,
No, thank
Harish.
you, Shashank. That's fantastic. So one of the things, right? I think the starting point is all about data, right? So AI is nothing but a pattern recognition machine. It's basically recognizes pattern which normal human being will not be able to recognize. So to recognize pattern also, you need certain data sets to be available. And if the data sets of a particular individual or a collective number of people that we want to analyze has to be made available. And that's the first step. Once that is available, then we have AI algorithm which can be trained on those data sets to serve a particular purpose, right?
All
Yes,
right. Thank
Ashish.
you. Thank you so much, Hari sir, first of all, for joining us today and for demonstrating unique way of presenting, which was actually thought-provoking for all of us and must be interesting. So thanks a lot for that. Thank you so much, students, for all the great questions which came across, and Hari sir for responding them well. Thank you so much, Dr. Sashank,
Thank
as
you.
well for adding on to that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. With that, let us now move on to our last but not the least session of the day, which is importance of evidence-based medicine in healthcare. And for that, we have with us Dr. Atiya Faruqi, professor of pharmacology, St. John's Medical College, Bangalore. Dr. Athiya, with nearly 20 years of research experience and 19 years on the St. John's faculty in experienced clinical investigator. He has led multiple academic and industry leading trials and currently serves as principal investigator on an ICMR National Task Force project. She is a life member of ISCR and actively engages with the ISCR South chapter. Dr. Faruqi contributes to institutional governance and stewardship as a member of the Drugs and Therapeutic Committee, the Institutional Antimicrobial Stewardship Program, and the Narayana Health Academic Ethics Committee. With that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Athiya on stage. Ma'am, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and happy to be here. Let me just see if I can share my slides. I always am skeptical about this technology. Yes, it seems like it's going. Can you please confirm if my slides are visible?
Yes.
It is visible.
All right. Thank you for giving this opportunity, and it's wonderful to speak here on a platform where such good presentations have happened this afternoon. And I'm happy to be speaking to young budding pharmacologists from different parts of the country. However, this 30-minute presentation on EBM is just like a trailer for a 3-hour movie. It will give you an idea of what the plot is and what the actors are, but it will not really give you the whole picture unless you watch it. So hopefully this trailer is enticing enough for you to go and dig more into what EBM is. So, however, like we make biryani, unless we make the biryani, just knowing the ingredients is not enough. So, until you use the ABM, you're not going to be actually equipped with understanding the nuances and very nice but important and useful qualities and skills that pharmacologists should have. And starting my presentation with my first slide here. Let's start moving. All right, so I think, yeah, now it moves, right? So I would be covering the evidence-based medicine overview, what are the basics, and I just will reduce the size of this. There is a screen which is coming up. All right, now this better. All right, so I'm back here. I'll cover EBM foundations, EBM process, what are the tools for critical appraisal, and role of EBM in medical affairs, which will be the highlighting the topic of today's session. Let me start with the very beginning of what EBM is and who started it. So I hope this picture is familiar to few people. I'm sure not many people would know him, but he is Dr. David Sackett. He is the one who actually coined the term clinical epidemiology. And he is known as one of the 3 fathers of modern clinical medicine. He also pioneered the RCT designs and he put into place the critical appraisal skills, which I mentioned that are useful for all young budding pharmacologists. The next person in this field is Dr. Gordon Guy. He coined the term evidence-based medicine, and also he drafted the instruments like health-related quality of life measures, and he is instrumental in creating the GRADE approach and refining it. And these 2 pioneers lead us the way of evidence-based medicine, how we know it at our present learning. So Dr. David Sackett defined EBM as a triad. It is not just knowing the information, reading papers. It is the intersection of best research evidence, where we put together valid, clinically relevant research. We get the clinical expertise, which is like the internal database of the practitioner, which they can apply to the critical situation, as well as we include patient values and preferences. In EBM, this is the first time that patient values were put together along with what the physicians thought based on evidence and their own expertise. And the intersection of these is what we call the evidence-based medicine triad. Okay, so this is a very popular pyramid, which depicts the hierarchy of evidence, and most of you are familiar with it. Let me just quickly take you through this, that we start with animal research in vitro, and this helps us in basic understanding. Now, just with the AI being in place, we have seen how we can fast forward different phases of research. We can fast forward animal research, go into clinical cases, get patients fast, and get the drug into out. We also have hypothetical trial data. So this is our traditional hierarchy of evidence, and each stage of this evidence actually helps us in increasing the quality of evidence that we have. The gold standard, however, all of you know, is the meta-analysis and systematic reviews. It principally puts into place all that knowledge that we have based on either RCTs that are conducted or well-conducted cohort and case control studies in a particular area. Putting it all together, we get our clinical guidelines, which help us in understanding and putting in place our different data to be able to guide us into particular patient treatment. The EBM process follows few of these following steps. We have to know what is the PICO framework, what is a critical appraisal, what are the key skills for that, and very important is to identify EBM. So let me take you through a few of these. The PICO framework, most of you know, is it's an acronym of population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. We do this for every question. We need to get the clarity and putting it together as to in population, who are the populations that we are going to deal with, intervention, who are the people we are going to intervene on, comparator, what is an outcome, what is either we're comparing with a placebo or a standard of care or an outcome, what are we measuring? So when we look at conducting a study, we define all of these. We define our population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. When we look at studies conducted by others and what is in place, then we evaluate whether these PICO parameters are in sync with what we are trying to search. So if a study is available, what are the key components on this? This will help us in framing a right question. I will come to it in the subsequent slides as to how it will practically be applicable. Certain basic things that we really need to know when we look at data. We look at something called internal validity, and internal validity tells you whether the study was done correctly. It gives you details. If for an RCT, it gives you a detail of randomization, blinding, intention to treat. For an observational study, it will also tell you if they have identified certain confounding factors which can impact the outcomes. So it tells you how well the study is done. External validity is what we know, which is how the study population reflects the real world patients. So as you know that we do research on a group of people and then we use those research results to see if they are applicable to a population. So a well-conducted study should have a good internal validity, as well as it is able to have an external validity where it is valid, it is applicable to patients in a real-world setting. There are certain biases which are very important to identify when you are going to look at evaluating research data. And what are these? One is selection bias. So you want to see when a study is conducted, who was included, and more importantly, who was excluded from the study. And this helps us in understanding whether the external validity of the study is applicable. Okay. Then we look at attrition bias. When patients drop out of a study, that is quite critical for its results and outcomes. And if there is a high attrition bias, anything above 20% dropouts, the study becomes less valid. In fact, above 20% attrition, the study is invalid. But the lower the attrition, the better we are, the more confident we are that the study was run correctly and completed well. Performance bias, how the study actually was performed. who were the patients, how were they included, how was the study run, and was there blinding. So having a blinding part of a control trial actually enhances its quality. And detection bias, if the outcomes were objectively reported. A double-blinded study would be best, and utilizing or outcomes which are objective rather than subjective gives us more credibility. And finally, publication bias. Publication bias alludes to selectivity in publications, and we know that positive results over negative ones are ones which are preferred to be published. This, however, skews the overall pool of evidence, and presence of publication bias is identifiable using several techniques. We have the funnel plot, or we have the Eggers test to identify whether in a particular given area, whatever results you have are published only because they are positive, or whether we have a paucity of data where the results may have been neutral or negative. And knowing that publication bias is a reality, we then look at the results which we are taking of any particular group of studies and analyze them accordingly. A note on what is difference between efficacy and effectiveness, and it's primarily difference between when we do a study in a control condition versus a real world. So an efficacy will give you how a drug works under ideal, strictly controlled conditions, where internal validity is high and the study design minimizes biases. However, effectiveness is in the context of real world practice, where you have a drug which is working in real world conditions, where you have all kinds of different parameters influencing the impact. And this effectiveness helps us in identifying generalizability, also called as external validity. And this helps us in cross-referencing and helps us to synthesize our inference based on the given condition. Certain statistical concepts and data interpretation are very, very important when you look at evidence-based medicine. And understanding of these basic statistical concepts are very, very essential for pharmacologists working in different aspects of industry, especially those who are looking at data and trying to collate it together. And what are these? One of them is the difference between significance and precision. So when we look at data, we very commonly talk about p-values and confidence intervals, but it is very important to understand that p-values give us statistical significance. However, the confidence interval gives you the precision of the estimate. So it's important to always understand that there is the confidence interval is as relevant, if not more, than p-values. Okay. Then understanding of basic effect measures like relative risk, odds ratio, absolute risk reduction. These are terms which are key, very key in understanding how data presents itself and how outcomes are measured. There are certain clinical utility matrices which we need to understand. An important one is numbers needed to treat, which helps us understanding real world impact. I'll come to that in the next slide. And also, what is the sample size that a study has utilized? What was the sample size adequate? Because it's critical to understand the data that we've gotten from a study. How does it stand? How does it fare in terms of its reliability? To give a good effect size, we need a good power. So when we talk about relative risk reduction and number needed to treat, just let us understand a basic concept, taking you back into very basic fundamentals. So if you look at an event rate in the treatment group, and suppose an event rate in the treatment group is 1%, and event rate in control group is 2%. So we represent them with these abbreviations. So to calculate relative risk reduction, we look at a difference which is divided by the control event rate. And in this case, if you have 2% in control and event rate is 1%, which is divided by 2, so it becomes as 50%. So your relative risk reduction in a given scenario becomes 50%. So when you plot it, or when you look at absolute risk reduction, you look at difference between the event rate in the control and the treatment group. So in this given situation, you have a 1% absolute risk reduction, whereas the relative risk reduction is 50%. So when you plot it in a graphical format like this, we see that if you put a graph, a 50% relative risk reduction looks like this massive reduction, huge graph there. And an absolute risk reduction, however, which gives you a 1%, looks a little tiny here. Let me just highlight that in a marketing perspective, we have the relative risk reduction, which is highlighted. Okay, so you can say when you're looking at a marketing data and people are promoting the drug, they promote the number 50% as a relative risk reduction. But if you look at the medical view, which looks at absolute risk reduction, then you highlight that it is only a 1% absolute risk reduction. So here you see here how visual data really has an impact. Now going on to calculation of number needed to treat, it is an inverse of absolute risk reduction. So if you have a 1% risk reduction, that means you need 100 people to treat to reduce the event in one person. Okay, so 100 patients required to prevent one event. And this number you have to balance with how much cost you'll have to spend in treating these 100 patients. And you're also exposing them to an additional risk of adverse effects. And therefore, you have to see the balance of cost and ADR profile versus benefit. So a high number needed to treat is a little discouraging if you feel in the terms of requirement or result which is favorable. A low number needed to treat will tell you that the drug is more effective and you're exposing lesser number of people to an additional adverse drug reaction possibility. Okay. So how do we go about our evidence-based analysis or evaluation? Okay. So we need certain tools for critical appraisal, and we are familiar with the tools which are available for different types of study designs. I'll just revise all of them for your review here. So for RCTs, we look at Cochrane risk of bias tool. We also have YADAT and consort score, and this helps you in identifying whether the randomization, blinding, and ITT were good enough in these, and therefore the paper of quality of the research paper, quality of the research study and the paper, and how much you can believe on the results. A systematic review is reviewed by AMSTAR 2 or a PRISMA. It helps it focus in what was the search strategy, how are the studies selected, what was the risk of bias in each of these. An observational study data can be evaluated using a Newcastle-Ottawa scale or a stroke, very commonly used, and identify confounding variables and selection procedures. And a qualitative study has COREC as its evaluated recommended tool and looks at the credibility and reflexivity. So using these tools for critical appraisal of research articles, then you can have your evidence put together on what is available data. Okay. So these are a little screenshots of how the stroke checklist from the website looks. This is the Cochrane methods bias, which gives you the risk of bias tools. And coming to a website by McMaster University called ABM1, they look at a system called GRADE. So GRADE is the short form for grading of recommendation assessment, development and evaluation. And this is a systematic approach to rate the certainty of evidence in systematic reviews and other evidence synthesis. This grade again was put together and refined and gets continuously updated. Dr. Gordon Guide is one of the active members of this group. The grade approach actually helps you in identifying the types of studies which are used in systematic review synthesis, and they give a higher or they give a value of certainty of evidence. So this is COE, certainty of evidence, and a high certainty of evidence is given to randomized studies, and non-randomized studies usually have a low certainty of evidence. These are the features which can reduce the certainty of evidence, which could be risk of bias, inconsistency, or indirectness, imprecision, publication bias, as I mentioned. They can reduce your certainty of evidence, and evidence can be upgraded through use of well-conducted studies which have large effect and which actually identify the confounding factors. So the grade then qualifies a study into high, moderate, low, or very low. Please do go and have a look at all these websites and resources. These are for your trailer for your further research into further study into this topic. The other useful resource is Center of Evidence-Based Medicine by Oxford University. It has its tools for identifying and looking at validity of studies, for RCTs, for systematic reviews. Do look at these, which have very, very methodically collected checklists with them. Now, coming to what is the role of EBM in medical affairs, in the next 5 minutes, I will put it together and conclude. The most important thing is that in medical affairs, you are expected to be the bridge between what R&D has brought out the data, what commercial is going to put out, and the feedback from patients. So it translates primarily in both directions, from R&D to the field. That means what is your complex clinical data? How do you put it into the field? Having practical medical insights into applicability of the data. And as well as you have the reverse, from the field back to the company, bringing back real world feedback and patient insights to shape the strategy. So you all know that now patient inputs are important in designing of our trials, and this evidence-based medicine helps medical affairs people to be able to bridge in both forward and backward in the manner that I just described. In clinical development and R&D, in phase 1 to 3 trials, you will be able to help us in identifying and putting together the best research methods. When the data is available, you can evaluate it well and also put the data together for going in for regulatory approval process by doing all the minute details of what all can impact your output and results. This will help you in defending your study in your presentation to the regulatory board. Real world application for medical affairs helps you in designing and overseeing clinical trials. So when the drug is already into the market, the data on post marketing and designing of phase 4 will be useful by knowing your already available evidence. And for conducting a real world evidence study, you really need to know what is the available evidence, what is the strength of that evidence with us. And further, to support any investigator-initiated research, you will need to be on top of what is available. Okay. Finally, generating health economics and outcomes research needs very well grounding in methods of evidence-based medicine. So we can summarize EBM and methods into 5 A's. Okay, you assess the problem, you ask the question, acquire the evidence using the tools, appraise the evidence using the tools, and apply it to the patient. Let's see 2 case scenarios where I'll just quickly walk you through each of these steps. And for your memory, it is all 5 as mnemonic, but let's see how they are applicable. So first case, we take an example where a new oncology drug A is approved as second-line treatment, and you are asked the question, how does it compare to drug B, which is already available, your drug, in terms of overall survival? And they're looking at a high-risk elderly patient. So first, what do? We assess the problem, the first A. So we identify that there is no head-to-head RCT comparison between these 2 drugs. Then we ask a question in a PIPO format. So what is the patient here? Which is patient population as elderly patients with high-risk metastatic diseases. The intervention is drug A, which is the company product, and drug B is a competitor molecule which is there available, and what you need to look at outcome of overall survival using the PICO framework. So this helps you in clarity on getting what is the question that I'm going to ask. What do you do after that? You go to acquire the evidence. You do a structured literature search. You look at what are the phase 3 results of the drug A, what are the phase 3 results of drug B, and then we see whether there is any subgroup analysis in elderly patients. If there is nothing available, we try to look at network meta-analysis, which is looking at comparisons of different non-directly compared drugs, and look for real world evidence studies which can help you in informing its applicability. Finally, safety data which is available, because we are looking at high risk elderly patients. Okay, so when you go to the fourth A, that is the appraising the evidence, you look at the basic nuances of, was the randomization adequate? Was there a subgroup pre-specified as elderly? Was the trial powered for the subgroup analysis? Any hazard ratios were statistically significant? Is a cross-trial comparison valid? And finally, with the fifth A, we apply it to the situation where phase 3 study of a drug A probably has given you a hazard ratio of 0.78, and the pivotal drug B actually is giving you 0.82. Again, these different trials have different populations and baseline risks, and we have to cautiously interpret the cross-trial comparisons where there are no direct head-on comparisons. Similarly, we go to a case example 2. Okay, so a recently launched anti-diabetic drug has been in the market for 18 months, and an observational study which is based on a database flags up saying that there is an increased risk of myocardial infarction seen in this drug X compared to standard therapy. And then people start reporting it in the media as well and talking about it. And then a cardiologist from your key opinion leaders asks, is your drug increasing heart attack risk? They're very concerned. So again, you go for your EBM, asking the 5 approaches. The first is assess the problem. The problem is post-marketing cardiovascular risk concern. When we ask the question in PICO format, type 2 diabetes patients are the patients here they are in real world settings. And your intervention drug X as compared to standard therapy, we are looking at incidence of myocardial infarction. We acquire the evidence from different places that we can. Okay? From pre-approval evidence of this drug, which before it came out into the market, we will have phase 3 RCT safety data. So we see if we have any cardiovascular outcomes available from that. We look at any adverse event rates reported in the phase 3, any subgroup analysis done. After the drug has been marketed, we look at any observational study has been done. Has there been any pharmacovigilance reports? Any global report, spontaneous reporting systems data is available, or if there are any ongoing real-world evidence studies. And external sources, we can look at regulatory communications, independent meta-analysis, competitor safety profiles, etc. We've appraised the observational study, whether we had any confounding, was there any indication? That means any higher risk patients were given who had higher baseline CV risks. Okay, if the indication was for sicker patients, or maybe the patients were more frequently monitored than, and they people not on the drug, and look at meaningful clinical reports on relative risk and absolute risk reduction. We look at confidence intervals. We look at how statistical risk significance versus clinical significance, and whether there was any temporal relationship between the adverse drug reporting and was there a biological plausibility available. The last of our EBM thing is apply to the situation. You do your own causality assessment, compare with the RCT data, and what if there was no statistically increased risk, balanced CV rates, pre-specified CV monitoring was done and did not show anything, then you can comfortably say that it is may not be a high risk and we can continue monitoring the output. So this EBM approach helps medical affairs to protect compliance. It helps in preventing selective data presentation. It helps in building trust when you are able to identify, and you are able to give data to your clients, key opinion leaders, and general physicians who you will interact with. And it helps in transparency, and pair discussions can be done, identifies research evidence gap. And this is also very, very important for you to take home, that you can, these approaches can help you identify a need for indirect treatment comparison, or a real world study can be designed, an investigator initiated trial can be designed as and when these trial problems keep coming up. Okay. So the key take home messages for this session would be that medical affairs functions as bridge between pharma companies and medical community. And medical affairs professionals like all of you aspiring to be must stay updated on the latest EBM practices and methodologies, read more in depth and breadth, should facilitate medical affairs should facilitate best support to healthcare providers and patients with all the upcoming questions which are coming up of safety concern, of efficacy. You look at evidence, you can appraise it, and you can come back with definite answers. And therefore, EBM can be called as currency for medical affairs, and resources for EBM are very important tools which all of you should be well versed with. We have certain suggested readings, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Athia ma'am, for joining us today. In fact, I was able to connect really well with the presentation that was going on, because this is one of the major KPIs for medical affairs team, to ensure the integration of evidence-based medicine into clinical practice, so that more and more number of patients are benefited out of it. So thank you so much for that. I know we are running short of time, but I do have one question upon which I'll seek your inputs, ma'am. And the question is something which is revolving around patient perspective. So, what are the best practices to integrate patient values and social context alongside evidence, especially when benefits are marginal?
Yes, the key point here is benefits are marginal. Okay. The very important example for it would be in oncology, where you have decision to take the patient for treatment, and there are treatment available, but as you said, benefits are marginal. Patient is already in advanced stage. Here, although the physician feels that at least a trial of the oncology drug should be done, but we will have to consult the patient and see what the patient personally prefers. Okay. A communication, clear communication, giving the context, giving the entire idea of what is the risk for taking the drug, what would be the benefit. And although the patient's relatives putting in the social context, putting pressure on the physician uh, to make the patient agree, feeling that at least we should have a feeling that we've done our best, or we've done something for the patient. In this case, the patient, if they choose to refuse treatment, choosing not to go through the risk, and choosing not to take the chemotherapy, then you have to actually honor that decision of the patient and look for palliative care of treatment for that patient, rather than forcing chemotherapy which the patient does not prefer, and may not really benefit the patient overall. So such decisions sometimes are very difficult, but there are times when you also need to consider costs. And the social pressure, yes, it is there, but cost of therapy make a patient choose one therapy over the other. So the major shift of the physician deciding the treatment for the patient versus the patient being involved in the discussion and choice of the treatment is the actual pivot of evidence-based medicine, where you reflect, or where you value the patient's inputs as much, and patient's wishes as much as the physician's decisions.
All right, thanks a lot, ma'am. We know we are running short of time, but this is one last question upon which I'll seek your input, because I feel that this is something which is really important for the students who are actually interested into entering into pharmaceutical industry. So the question, now, Dr. Farooqi, would be, what framework? I know that you have touched base onto this particular part during your presentation, but yeah, still I would want you, if you could, just reiterate it. The question is, what frameworks help de-implement low value or outdated practices safely and quickly?
So there are certain practices or there are certain medications which we can be repurposed. Okay, so repurposing of the drug is actually one important uh, research area which is going to be very beneficial because certain drugs which may not have worked in a particular area can be used significantly better. For example, thalidomide is one of those examples. And with AI with us now, we are able to predict with the molecular thing as well as different pathways of activity and mechanisms of action, matching them with disease pathways. We can look at possible utility of drugs with repurposing in a drug into another therapeutic area. Outdated practices, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if the practice is outdated because it was not beneficial clinically, then I'm I wouldn't be able to answer. But if it was difficult to access, difficult to manufacture, difficult to administer, we have our improvements and improvisations which can be done for them. So I hope that has partially answered your question. Not, I'm sure it's not fully answered.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, ma'am. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you to the students for asking amazing questions, and to ma'am for
Thank you. It was a
explaining.
pleasure
Thank
for
you so
me.
much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, so that brings us to the end of the day, and let me thank all the speakers of the day that gave us some great, insightful talks. Thanks a lot to everyone. Stay tuned for day 4 of PharmaSteer, which is scheduled on 7th of March 2026, because we have some great topics lined up, and that would make sense in terms of the role we are in at this point of time, right? And at the same time, I would also be announcing about the internship program as well. So I'm looking forward to see you all on day 4 for PharmaSteer 2026. Feel free to reach out to our speakers from AstraZeneca via LinkedIn, and to me as well if you have any feedback if you have any questions across which you needed answers, right? So thanks a lot for your participation today. Looking forward to see you all at day 4 of PharmaSteer 2026. Thank you so much.